Hey, Wes here. Thanks for joining me today. It's been a while since I've made a video, so I'm anxious to get back into my workshop here and get something done. On my bucket list, I've been wanting to make something like this. This is a Cibola whiteware Olla, and I'm thinking I want to make it relatively large, but I like this big round shape with the narrow neck. I'll have to think about what kind of design I might want on it. So this is the Pookie I think I'm going to use. I did a video about this some time ago, making a Pookie. I used made a plaster cast. So I think that's what I am going to do. And yesterday I made up a bag of clay. So this should be enough, but a pot this large is going to take quite, I'm sorry, I'm shaking the camera. Well, it's going to take quite a bit of clay. So let's get started. Okay, I know it's not exactly authentic, but I roll my initial piece of clay out on a piece of cloth. This is just an old sheet. Wouldn't have to do it, but I'm going to line the Pookie with a piece of sheet. So let's see if I can get this into the Pookie. All right, so far, but it almost always pulls apart and cracks. Doesn't want to go in very well. And so you can see that it has problems, and that's okay. I mean, I probably would be better off being less aggressive, I guess. I'm making the bottom of this a little bit thicker. You can see how thick this is. All right, it's kind of a mess, but let's see if I can get this kind of smoothed out. One of the things I'll do is kind of hold it in here. I don't want a rim on this right here. I'm gonna bring it in. Okay, for the initial smoothing, I think this is fine. I'll work on it more. But then what I need to do is kind of clean up this edge and see if I can get all these seams to be sealed up. Okay, you can see the edge, it's messy, so that's okay. Hopefully you can clean that up. I'm also wanting to pull it in from the edge of the pot, or edge of the Pookie, so I'm less likely to get that Pookie line. This really isn't a scraper, it's more like a spacer made out of a milk jug, but I stick it down inside between the Pookie and the pot, and sometimes I can use that to kind of shape it a little bit, get out some of the creases and so on, and create some space so I'm less likely to have a ridge on that Pookie line. Okay, let's even this off. Makes everything a little bit easier. All right, what I'm doing here, I'm just bringing it in, again, to try and eliminate the Pookie line. What inevitably happens is because of the weight of this thing, it'll sag some. And as I build it, it just has a tendency to kind of expand and grow out, and will hit that Pookie line. And that's all fixable, but I would like to avoid it if I can. So if we measure this thing, the inside diameter is right at 12 inches. And if I can continue to do that, that'll be okay. But it's going to shrink. It's probably going to go down to 11 inches or something on the inside. And that is big enough for my purposes. So you can see these seams here. A lot of times you can just scrape them smooth. Other times you might need to fill them in a little bit. I can imagine on the very bottom there's all kinds of stuff. I just don't want to deal with it right now. Another nice thing about having this piece of sheet in here, I can pull on it and expose the pot. Makes it a little bit easier. So it's time to put on the first coil. Got a pretty big chunk of clay here. Probably can't make a coil that will go all the way around. It's just too big. So one of the things I usually do is kind of flatten the coil out. Definitely not necessary. Some people do, some people don't. I just think it seems to fit a little better. It's going to get flattened out anyway. But that almost makes it all the way around, doesn't it? Everybody seems to have their own kind of style for pinching, and this is just what seems to work. This is all wild clay, like I think I mentioned before. Two different kinds of clay. One is more firm, great for building. The other is smooth. And then with this clay, I've got 20% sand temper. And it's just me, but I go around once one direction and then I go back the other and just kind of smooth it out. I almost never have cracks in my seams. And so I try to spend a reasonable amount of time getting everything smeared from one side to the other. So once I bond on the outside, I go around and bond on the inside. And then I'll scrape it and try and get it in the right kind of shape. So what I'm doing is I'm supporting on the outside with my fingers and pushing in and down with my thumb. That's how I do it. Other people do it differently, but I want that top coil to overlap the bottom part of the pot, just kind of like you have shingles on a roof. So then I just take a scraper and scrape and smooth. I want that seam to disappear. So I've scraped the inside now. Scrape the outside. Sometimes I scrape the outside first. I don't know if it makes any difference. Now I use little plastic scrapers. I make these from, I think, the Rubbermaid containers or Tupperware or something like that. I like them because they're flexible, but some people like gourd scrapers, metal scrapers. I mean, I don't think it makes any difference what you like. Do what feels good in your hands, you know. You always get used to certain things. All right, that's reasonably smoothed. And now I just need to pinch up the sides to get those, to start raising up the pot. So this is a compression pinch. Right now, the thickness of this coil is like 3/4 of an inch, and I need to get it down to about 1/4 of an inch. So just, hopefully you can see this, just pinching it forces it up. And so I'm pinching, and I'm also sometimes kind of moving upwards at the same time just to get it to go in the direction I want. The goal here is simply to raise the sides up. I will shape them more, smooth them out later on. I'm also trying to feel the thickness with my fingers so that it stays the same thickness to the extent that I can. Not only is that good aesthetically and for conserving clay, but if you have a lot of variety in thickness, it can dry unevenly, it can fire unevenly, it may end up more likely to have cracks in it. Sometimes I'm also pulling up on the inside as well as pushing up on the outside. All right, you can see that the pot isn't curving in. In fact, I want the middle of the pot to be about here. So I need to start curving in so I can start working on that with my scraper. In this case, I'm using a little bit of water, but I'm just kind of pushing it the direction I want it to go while I am scraping and smoothing this. I'm not in a big hurry. Again, little increments seem to be best. Don't ask your clay to do too much. It's set for about an hour or so. I'm going to put on another coil, and I'm not going to show much of this, but one, the coil is a little bit smaller, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm curving the bowl in, or the Olla in, and just gravity tends to want to make it sag, and so just to reduce the amount of weight, so I'll have a little bit smaller coil. The other thing is that then when I lay this coil in, I'm going to angle it in a little bit. It just kind of flows on a little bit better that way. Okay, the second coil is on, reasonably smoothed out. So I'm just going to cover this for now and come back in a couple of hours. All right, I've got this coil on, but as you can tell, the shape is not right, and it's kind of flared out too much. So what I've got to do, I probably don't get this on camera very well, you pinch and you push in at the same time and then also I'm pushing down a little bit because I want to get more of a curve in. So now use a scraper and I'm kind of smoothing it around to kind of take the shape that I want. It has a bit of a ridge right here. I could probably be neater than this, but this is just a system that seems to work for me. It's obviously very wonky right now, but the clay is pliable, and so I should be able to manipulate it into the shape that I want. So I'm looking straight down on the pot, and the hole is about the right size, but it seems to be off center. So the little cookie cutter that I have sitting there, I think that's about in the middle. And so I have to fill some things in, make some adjustments before I put the color on. All right, I've filled things in, moved the hole. I think it is reasonably in the center. It's as good as I'm going to get it to be. So the next step is to put on the collar. Here's what I've done for the top. I rolled out some clay. Another way to do that would be to make a coil and build it up. So I don't know if this is inauthentic or not, but I'm going to just do my best to stick that on. Okay, you can see how I've scored it, and I'll get this good and wet too before I apply the rim. So you can see how I have a rim built up in there. And then my goal here is just this is the end of an X-Acto knife, try and smooth all that out. Okay, I'll put a fillet around the edge here as well. All I do is just take some clay and just kind of mush it in there. Then I'll straighten that out with a scraper. Well, here it is. The basic vessel pot is done. So what I need to do is come back tomorrow after it's dried out some and clean up all these irregularities. And then kind of the elephant in the room is underneath here where it's sitting in the pookie. I know there's creases and that sort of thing in the clay, and I'm going to have to address that. My concern is that the whole thing will just cave in if it's not well supported. My favorite scraper are these things. These are ribs from antelope, and I like the different sizes, the different shapes. And so that's the first. What I want to do is get all the little bumps and undulations, or as many out as I reasonably can. So it's just a matter of scraping off all these areas to try and get it all at one level. And this is a little bit tedious, but it's also kind of meditative, I suppose. This is something that you want to do when the pot is firm enough so it doesn't flex, but soft enough so that you can reasonably scrape these things. I take rocks. These are not particularly polished rocks. They have a little bit of texture to them. That seems to work best because the point is not to polish this, but to just smooth it out, to get it all one even surface to the extent that you can. So I dip these in water and just start rubbing back and forth. It's one of the things when you do that, it softens the clay on the top, and you can see the imperfections, I guess. It's never going to be perfect. And you keep rubbing back and forth, and it turns that top layer into kind of a slurry. And it's a lot like troweling cement, if you've ever done that. And it starts leveling things off. Also, if there are any little bits of temper, this has a lot of sand in it, it'll push those down. So it's important to do this when the pot is leather hard or relatively soft. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's just a little indentation there. And so I'll take just a small piece of clay and then rub it in. And if you rub it, it fills it in, and the patch just disappears. All right, now it's time, I think, to take the pot out of the pookie. And what I've done, I've got another large pookie here. I fill it up with some cloth and padding and so on. And my goal here is hopefully to lift this out and lay it on its side. So let's see what we end up with here. Lift it up. Yep, it's lifting out. And expect it to look messy, and it does. You can see that huge seam there, but you know, I know it's smoothed out on the inside, and so it's okay. Here it is, the final pot. And so the next step is just to slip it and paint it and get it fired. So still a lot of work to be done. Well, this has been a great project. Really have enjoyed it. I'm happy with the way it's turned out so far. A lot more to do. But thank you for joining me, and thanks for your comments and your likes and subscriptions, all of those kinds of things. And until next time, I wish you health, happiness, peace, and love. Take care. Bye-bye.